Hey there Crimlets, welcome back to another video. It's that time again to do another Scape and Run Parasites update video. We'll be covering updates 1.9.9 through 1.9.16. I have a few important things to say, so listen closely. If you want to be caught up to speed or give yourself a refresher, you should check out my SRP playlist. You can find its link at the very bottom of the description. I'm using NoCube's combat add-on for this video because quite frankly, I'm sick of dying over and over. If you want to learn more about this add-on and its siblings, I have a full showcase on my channel. That too is linked in the description. If you're only here for the massive 1.9.13 update that adds the new Farrell variants, Vermin, hijacked Iron Golem, and more good stuff, you can go to this timestamp. For the rest of us, we will start with update 1.9.9. This update mainly consists of changes to the living/sensing armor and dispatchers. Both armor sets have been hit with buffs and nerfs. They can now adapt to damage types and are immune to the corrosive effect. For the nerfs, attackers will be given Koth, and fire/burning damage is increased to the wearer. This is governed by the mob fire damage multiplier config value. The enchantability for the armor and weapons has been set to 1. For reference, diamond equipment is 10 and golden equipment is 22 to 25. This means rolling better enchantments will be harder since the value is so low. The dispatcher AI has seen some changes. All dispatcher stages can now target multiple mobs at the same time, and they can quote-unquote store parasites to later spawn them. A Buglin will spawn as a Ruptor from stage 2 dispatchers, a Ruptor will spawn as a Mangler from stage 3, if enough assimilated are stored it will spawn a Primitive from stage 3, and if enough incomplete forms are stored it will spawn as a Crude parasite. For this to happen, 6 points are required. Small incompletes are worth 1 point, and medium incompletes are worth 2 points. Heat spawns from stage 2, and Crux spawns from stage 3. The last noteworthy change of this update is Elite being removed from the Sim Enderman crawling variant. Update 1.9.10 is a bit chunkier with changes to the corrosive effect, armor, mobs, and a few other things. Dispatchers have been changed yet again. They will now apply effects to relocated parasites, and let me tell you, this is going to be a pain to deal with. These effects are from update 1.9.11, but I thought I would include them here. If a previously stored parasite despawns, it will return to the dispatcher if possible, and dispatchers will not target multiple mobs if the total number of mobs is greater than the number of parasites stored. Dispatcher tentacles will not remove evolution points when killed. They spawn parasites 1 second faster. One tentacle can only spawn 1 parasite. Spawn rate of tentacles has been decreased. The number of tentacles a dispatcher can spawn depends on the stage, which is multiplied by 3, meaning a stage 4 can spawn up to 12 tentacles. And the tentacles attack logic has been tweaked. This is a work in progress. Alrighty then, that's everything for the dispatcher. Our beloved assimilated Enderman has been nerfed. Parasites will take damage from Sim Enderman teleports. If the Sim Enderman is on fire, there's a 75% chance for teleported mobs to be set on fire. The teleport sound effect will be played when finding a player, and there's a teleportation cooldown when finding an enemy. This cooldown is removed when the Sim Enderman receives damage. This also applies to the teleportation of allies. And speaking of which, ally teleportation has a separate cooldown. Sucker changes include spawning from preeminence will now generate biomass particles, their XP value has been reduced, and their flying logic has been tweaked. We've got quite the list of other parasite changes. If Beacon or primitive/adaptive summoner is on fire, then biomass will be set on fire. Spawn parasites will also be set on fire and their health will be halved. Biomass passively regenerates health now. Minimum charge attack distance for Warden, Reeker, and Cow has been tweaked. Mangler, Monarch, Warden, Marauder, Grunt, and Haunter can now dash. Deterrent and Nexus parasites will die slowly if evolution phases are on, and the reinforcement system chance of the current phase is 0. Additionally, Beacons and Dispatchers will convert connected blocks of their current position. Heavy Bomber has a new mob table list which includes Overseer, Vigilante, Marauder, and Monarch. Texture changes for the primitive Arachnida and its variants, Buglin and Thrall. Sound effect changes for the Sim Wolf, Boggle, Wraith, and adapted long arms. The changes to the corrosive effect is its config damage value has been lowered from 5 to 3, and the effect will no longer destroy armor. The damage will stop at 10% of total durability. To finish up 1.9.10, we have some equipment changes. Living and sentient equipment have updated alternate textures thanks to Vanelli, and both armor sets have a Chancellor instead of Always. This is referring to its adaptation. The throwing ball item has been renamed to Quench. Its range has been increased from 3 to 7, has a cooldown of 1 second, and there's a recipe for it. The Purifier block will now scan a 32 block radius every random tick for Nexus parasites and mark them with the glowing effect. It will also clean infestations in a 5-block radius by starting a chain reaction. Update 1.9.11 introduces more mob changes, a sizable nerf to evolution phases, and a few equipment tweaks. Several parasites have been modified. Beckon Stage 4 will now stop other beckons from growing. Kyphosis and long arms will now perform wave attacks. Incomplete forms will no longer place Nidus blocks. Sim Enderman with the rage effect will ignore teleport cooldowns. Killing Caesar tentacles will not decrease evolution points. Dispatcher and Caesar tentacle no longer drop experience. And there are new sound effects for adapted Arachnida and assimilated cow. Concerning the important config changes, Phase 1 through 3 point requirements have been increased to make early game easier. Colony Carrier and Boggle Orb's default effects lists have been changed, along with a small Wraith Orb effect addition. The Levitation Amplifier is not a typo, it is in fact negative, which puts restrictions on jumping. Lastly, the Overseer mob list now includes the Grunt, and those Dispatcher effect list updates we covered in 1.9.10 are now implemented. For the equipment side of things, Parasites will be given the Rage effect if they are within the scanning radius of a Purifier block. Living/Sentient Armor shows the current list of adaptation and their values, and Quench's item texture is updated, and the entity spawns particles now. The last bits of 1.9.11 include local parasites gaining the Rage effect upon evolution phase decreases, and /SRP evolution get phase now including the current number of parasites in the world. Update 1.9.12 boasts significant parasite changes and a few minor item and block tweaks. A new Wave Shock ability is making its first appearance. It's aptly named Entity Wave Shock. It's an offensive parasite ability that will not follow you, breaks blocks, and throws enemies into the air. This has a rather big hitbox, so keep that in mind. Wave Shock is currently used by Long Arms, Wooten, Host, and Herd. Boggle and Wraith are now invisible until they shoot, take damage, or on low HP. Additionally, Suckers summoned during this invisibility are also invisible for a short duration. Sucker Blast damage now uses the value of the damage attribute of the parasites that summoned it. This is multiplied by 2. Other parasite changes are as follows. Pures will not summon Caesars if the current phase does not support Nexus parasites. Sim Enderman will not damage other Sim Endermen when teleporting them, and the Haunter boss bar has been removed. It doesn't end there. The following parasites have been blessed with base stat buffs. Heavy Bomber health from 150 to 420, Colony Carrier health from 150 to 390, its damage is now 45, Boggle health from 150 to 310, its damage is now 70, Wraith health from 150 to 310, its damage is now 70, and Haunter health from 150 to 360, its damage is now 110. Yeah, so the preeminence are to be avoided at all costs. Regarding the config changes, mob cap maximum value has been increased to 50,000, which is bonkers. All dispatcher stages speed amplifiers have been reduced by 1, and heavy bomber explosion multiplier is now 6. Quench will now clean infestation blocks similarly to purifier blocks, and beacon and deterrent spawn eggs are textured differently now, apparently. Sys blocks will not always make a sound when eating items. Vacuous sys blocks will now turn into air blocks if floating. Nidus blocks will not spawn dispatchers if current phase does not support Nexus parasites, but will instead add points. /SR Parasites shows current number of parasites loaded in current parasite mob cap. /SRP evolution get phase shows this as well now. That concludes 1.9.12 changes. Update 1.9.13 is the main focus of this video, considering it adds new mobs, changes a multitude of current parasites, expands on the scent mechanic, and overhauls how lures work. First up are the new Farrell variants. There are a few ways these grotesque parasites spawn. They spawn naturally starting at phase 5, Koth spawns Farrell versions instead of assimilated starting at phase 6, and assimilated reaching 60 kills, and the new Gnat parasite burrowing into a vanilla mob that has an assimilated form. Farrell variants currently include the sheep, cow, pig, bear, horse, villager, human, and enderman. From what I understand, they aren't very different from their assimilated counterparts, with the exception of increased base stats and their ability to leap. Other than that, all Farrell mobs have a follow range of 16 blocks, excluding the Enderman. It has a range of 64. They can infect vanilla mobs and they don't adapt to damage. Oh, and it looks like a Feral Wolf is in the works. Two parasites are joining the primitive roster, the Tozoon and Vermin. Primitive Tozoon follows primitive spawning properties. It's a worm-based parasite that emerges from the ground to attack. It will adapt to damage considering it's a primitive parasite. Primitive Vermin also follows the primitive spawning conditions and adapts to damage. The Vermin's only purpose is to excrete the gnat parasite. This little bugger also comes from light carriers. It belongs in the inborn tier, which means it cannot adapt to damage. The gnat forces its way inside mobs. Doing so inflicts Farrell 3 for 5 seconds and creates Farrell variants if available. The assimilated squid is joining the Devourer underwater. Other than looking like spoiled calamari, it follows assimilated spawning conditions, it's very fast in water, suffocates on land, and does not have damage adaptation. The light carrier is another inborn addition, and it too follows its tier spawning conditions. This walking balloon does not adapt to damage, it explodes to release residue, ruptors, and gnats. The cloud it leaves behind inflicts viral for 3 minutes and poison for 15 seconds. The amplifier stacks depending on exposure length. The hijacked iron golem marks the downfall of villages worldwide. Gnats inserting themselves into iron golems is how these mechanical monsters are created. They do not belong in a tier, they do not adapt to damage, and they are capable of infecting vanilla mobs. That concludes all the new parasite additions. By the way, Hijack Blaze and Skeleton will join the iron golem in later updates, and something called the Draconites will also be added, although most likely not in the near future. We've got a whole list of parasite changes to look at, let's rip through them. Devourer swimming AI is improved and it swims faster now. Host and herd melee attack AI is improved. All beacons glow in the dark. Dispatchers are locatable by clicking on its tentacles. Dispatcher Caesar spawning cooldown is now 2 seconds. Overseer will no longer spawn biomass if target is not on the ground. Light and heavy bomber will no longer spawn bombs if the target is not on the ground. Light and heavy carrier will now place residue blocks when blowing up. Marauder no longer has a quick dash but now has a small leap. Its long jump cooldown has been increased. Warden dash distance is increased and cooldown is decreased. Ruck's follow range is now 64 blocks. Sim Enderman will not teleport if within 10 blocks of its target. Reduced horse explosion radius from 4 to 3.5. Adapted bolster now has the AoE attack similar to the Marauder. Long arms will not use wave shock if they cannot see their target. Adapted long arms, Arachnida, Ruptor, Mangler, Warden, and Marauder will not climb as much while following a target in close proximity. Architects will now summon workers. This is a colony thing and it's a work in progress. Primitive bolster default texture changed. Ruptor and Mangler now have Virulent and Berserker variants, and Heed will use Entity Parasitic Scent every 20 seconds. Modified base stats for the following parasites: Marauder health from 90 to 120, Marauder damage from 25 to 40, and Sim Enderman damage from 13 to 11. A new Breacher variant is now in the mod. This doubles the block hardness breaking capabilities of a parasite. Pause to see which parasites can spawn as this variant. Heavy, flying, light carriers, and all pure parasites will now target villagers. New sound effects have been given to quite a few parasites, and other parasites have had their sound effects tweaked as well. Get ready, I'm hitting you with another list of parasite changes. Assimilated mobs will not spawn naturally until their individual simulation value is valid. For example, a sim cow will not spawn naturally until 2 cows are previously assimilated. This goes for all sim parasites except for the sim ender dragon. Walking heads and feral parasites will now require individual assimilated spawning values to spawn naturally. Nexus versions are now affected by colonies. When killed, they will spawn their previous stage if possible. Parasites will not drop loot or XP while affected by the D-bar effect. Parasites on fire will have a chance to gain the rage effect, and the needler effect duration gained from orbs is tweaked. Adapted orbs increase the time by 35 seconds, pure is 70 seconds, and preeminence is 120 seconds. To wrap it up, heavy carrier mob table has been added to and tweaked. This is a config change, but I decided to include it here. 1.9.13 showed a lot of love for scent. I mean, just look at these config changes. This mechanic made its debut in 1.9.2, and I glossed over the details when I first covered it. Now I have a better understanding of it, so let me explain it to you. First of all, scent is disabled by default. Go to the system's config to enable it. Scent is basically an invisible entity that responds to parasite death locations. It summons new parasites and teleports already existing ones nearby to the scent's location. Scent will attach to a target and follow them wherever they go. There are different levels of scent. These levels require a certain amount of points. Points are gained when parasites die. The value of these points is based on what tier parasite was killed. Sim tier gives a low amount, while pure tier gives a high amount. Higher levels of scent spawns more dangerous parasites. Starting with this update, scent will spawn a massive worm, currently called Gothel, to summon the parasites. Although Gothel is incredibly broken in 1.9.13, it's incomplete and buggy, only spawning in water. When it's working, it will emerge from the ground, puke parasites out, and then go back underground. Scent is still a work in progress, so I'll just leave it at that for now. Phase spawn entity lists have seen some modifications, along with evolution phase point values. Things like sleep penalty, lures, carcasses, blocks, and parasite point values are tweaked. What is a carcass, you might be asking? We will get to that very soon. Let's talk about items. Projectile texture of Quench is changed, and Nexus Parasite spawn item texture is different. A new node compass is here to guide you to the core of a node. This only works if you're within the area of effect of a node. New wands await to be used. These are only available in creative. Evolution wand evolves parasites, de-evolution does the opposite, variant wand changes a parasite's variant, and assimilation wand assimilates mobs. Pretty self-explanatory. Concerning the block changes, infested blocks will no longer damage mobs and will not hurt players who aren't wearing boots. New parasite-themed blocks are in. These include Hivestone Debris, Hivestone Bricks, Hive Steel, Bleeding Obsidian, Bloody Ice, Consumed Wood, Assimilated Fungus, and Pestilential Ore blocks. The ore blocks are completely ruined. They can't be mined or smelted to collect materials. Oh, and there's a new Colony Outpost block. I'm not sure if it does anything special. To finalize the information of Update 1.9.13, there's much to be said about lures and carcasses. Lure blocks will not remove points anymore, but instead prevent parasites from gaining points for a duration. This is unstackable. If done successfully, the player will receive a point cooldown added message and the lure will disappear. Building a carcass is how you remove evolution points now. This is a multi-block build that requires lure blocks to be positioned in a certain way. Place a lure down. From all 4 of its corners, diagonally place another lure 2 blocks away. Different lure blocks can be mixed, but the center lure block will be what removes the points. Right-click the center lure to activate it. If done successfully, the player will receive a points reduced message. The lures will disappear and scent will be triggered and target the player who activated the carcass. The level of scent depends on what tier of lure was used. Update 1.9.14, 15, and 16 are very tiny and mostly fix 1.9.13 issues. Noteworthy changes are Vermin and Tozun added to the Beacon Stage 3 mob spawn list and Merge System mob list. Farrell Endermen are able to teleport other Farrell parasites now. Phase 8 lure and carcass values are corrected. A new Gnat cap option is introduced, allowing players to tweak their spawning properties. Gnats now have a lifespan of 1200 ticks, which is 60 seconds, and primitive vermin will drop bombs if Gnat cap is reached. That concludes updates 1.9.9 through 1.9.16. I left out a good portion of information I deemed unnecessary, like block texture updates, config changes, bug fixes, stuff like that. So, what do you guys think about the updates? Please leave a comment with your thoughts and opinions. While you're down there, check the description for mod links. Thanks for watching, like the video, subscribe, and consider becoming a channel member. You'll be put on screen along with these lovely people. And as always, Crimlets, stay snazzy.